Hello, I'm Robert Lomas. The 2022 Daniel Owen Festival will take place during the week starting the 17th of October 2022. Every Wednesday for the 7 weeks leading up to the start of the festival, I will issue an English translation podcast on YouTube of one of the 7 sermons that Daniel Owen wrote and delivered in Bethesda Chapel around 1877. These sermons give a wonderful insight into the religious influences which motivated Daniel Owen as a young man, and also gave him his first experience in writing and public speaking. In these sermons he explores the issues which encouraged him to enroll at Bala College to study to become a preacher, and also the doubts which drove him to abandon the course and eventually become a great novelist. I hope you enjoy my translations of Daniel's sermons, which are also available in book form in both Welsh and English. Sermon: The Impossibility of Christ Being Hidden, written and delivered by Daniel Owen in January 1877. He takes as his text, "From there he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and wanted no one to know him, but he could not be hidden." It's taken from Mark chapter 7, verse 24. Let's now move on to the sermon. Did Christ want to be hidden? There's something in the words of the evangelist that hardly suggests it. And if that was the case, then there's nothing to wonder about. The common tendency of men is to be explicit. Their need for revelation and understanding is great. Not the least of the unpleasant things about dying is that a dead man is hidden from view. It is a comfort to his mind that even in that situation he will have a tombstone with his name on it, to keep his memory in sight even when he has disappeared. But despite all this desire for a man to be noticed, there are times when being hidden is desirable. There are times when a man likes to be alone, to enjoy the relief and pleasure of loneliness, with no eyes to look into or to disturb the silence of his own thoughts. If this is true of ordinary men, what must it be like for more important men, the men who fill high circles in society? There are few men in the world who can't move from one town to another without half the world knowing all their impulses and behaviour by the following morning. They know they are being watched by thousands of eyes, looking at their faces and scrutinising their actions. They know that everything they say in public is printed, read by followers, harshly and sharply criticised by some, and acclaimed by others. They arise every morning to receive from their kinsmen as much respect and praise, disrespect and envy, as would insult half a century of ordinary men. Would it be such a surprise if such men tried to hide from the view of the world? No wonder Mr. Spurgeon, the eminent English Baptist preacher known as the Prince of Preachers, goes to Germany to spend his holidays. For as he said, he can find peace there, for the people cannot understand him, nor he them. This desire for tranquillity was undoubtedly felt by our Saviour at times during his public ministry. Behold, the world went after him. Every day for him was a day to face thousands of people, with himself the centre of the whole assembly. Every day for him was a day to undergo the force of scores of enemies and jealousies, to have to answer their stupid and difficult questions, to receive the praise and glory of his friends. He had to face unbelief in its worst form, and was called to witness diseases and ailments, disorders in their most horrific form. He had no time even to eat. Some yearned to listen to his teaching between his speeches. The crowd pressed him everywhere. If he escaped by sea in a boat, they followed him. What wonder is it that he felt exhausted? When he escaped to the towns of Tyre and Sidon, on the borders of the nations, where he was less well known, was it an attempt to hide from envy? But his praise ran before him, and even there the frail and the wounded, the lame and the unhealthy, came rolling along the roads in his wake, for he could not be hid. But there is a sense in which he had to be hidden. A full revelation of himself would obscure the objective of his coming into the world. If they had known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. He gradually manifested himself, but there was no patience or fairness in the multitude who followed him. Then the children would say, "We have seen his glory, the glory of the one from the Father, full of grace and truth." He wore a disguise, and in a sense, as Pascal says, he was more disguised after he appeared than before he emerged. The Israelites knew God better at a distance than when he came near them. He was in the world, and the world knew him not. Yet he could not be hidden. He was too great to be hidden. Christ was so magnificent that he could not hide himself. Everyone else was small compared to him, and so were able to hide. He was too great to hide himself. It is easy to hide the insignificant and small, but the large cannot be hidden. A small shower of snow might hide the view of a small estuary, but it is not possible for it to hide the sea. A little bird may run into the darkness and the fox to his den to hide themselves, but without the holy rock of ages there is no place where they can safely lay their heads. Few men are born into the world to be prominent. It is the fate of most men to be hidden. In a manner of speaking, 918 and 80 out of every 1,000 of mankind are like twins. That is, all seamen are similar to each other in abilities and talents, so that there is no greater difference between them than there is between any set of twins. Mankind is like an army of soldiers seen from a distance. When you look at a regiment of soldiers from a distance, arrayed by rank, all the soldiers seem the same, except for one or two that are seen raised on horseback, higher than the rest. That's a picture of mankind. Man's similar potential makes each almost hidden. 1,000,000 people can fall dead one day, without the world feeling any more than if 1,000 leaves fell in the forest. But Jesus could not be hidden. He rises in the middle of mankind like a prickly oak in the middle of a field of grass. In one sense, Jesus Christ was like all men, and was so like common men that the Jews, with their eyes open, mistook him for a sinner. Yet he surpassed the children of women, such that even a blind man saw the difference. He could not be hidden in all the circumstances of life. He could not be hidden at birth. Usually the birth of a man into the world is of no recourse to anyone but his mother and a few relatives and neighbours. It is true that some will come to see the newborn, but these are not the wise men. Jesus Christ was the object of great destiny even before his birth, and his coming was the wish of all nations. He was born in one of the poorest cities, in the poorest place in that city, but his birth could not be hidden. Its effects were large. It affected time. When Christ was born, the time came for his age. A star heralded his birth in Bethlehem. That was when he came into his Father's inheritance, in the fullness of time. His birth even affected the sky. There is a long tradition that the planets affect humans, especially at birth, and the trouble of knowing which planet he would be born under was great. When a child was born, it was thought that the influence of that planet had a great deal to do with the future of the child. There may be something in that, but there was only one who has ever known whose birth affected the planets. For we have seen his star in the east and followed it until we found the place where the little child was born and have come to worship him. His birth could not be hidden in heaven. The words of the angels and the shepherds that day were, "Let us go to Bethlehem, and he who was with the great angels of the heavenly force." He could not be hidden at the time of his birth. We were talking about men being similar, but the probability here is greater. There is little or no expression in the face of a newborn child, or in a child of that age, that does not convince you that he has the capacity to do more than shout and scream. But salvation was in the face of Jesus Christ when he was just 6 weeks old, and older people took the strength to die and live by the looks of it. Now, Lord, lettest thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For my eyes have seen the salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all peoples. Anna the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher, who was over 100 years old, was a mighty force in her day, and throughout her 100 years of life she spake of him, of a child, under the character of the Messiah, to all those who were desirous of deliverance in Jerusalem, for he could not be hid. This expression unquestionably applies to Christ during his public ministry. At that time all things came together to make it impossible for him to be hidden. An important element of his fame was his ability to perform miracles. It is surprising how much longing there is for the strange in men. Man's ability is finite. There is always a limit which no man can surpass, and exerts constant effort to get closer to that limit. The closer a man gets to achieving the impossible, the more prominent he becomes among his peers. The schoolboy who can do something other children can't, whether in learning or playing, becomes a hero, and the rest making king over them. Christ's ability to do things that no one else could made it impossible for him to be hidden. There was one thing that overwhelms man, and that is nature. Mankind feels that it has no authority over nature's laws. The highest thing a man could achieve is skill, which is an ability to understand and apply these laws. But men always imagine achieving something more. Picture a thoughtful old sailor caught by the storm one night on the Sea of Galilee, and contemplating the wind and rain. Wait, you sea, and you wind. Why do you confront an immortal creature like me? I am more than you both. Stop. Be at peace. But the sea would not listen to his words, and the wind would laugh around his head. Then consider the same sailor, in the same circumstances, trapped by the storm, but there is one other person on the ship who is sleeping. Had the wind and sea taken advantage of his sleep to become more disturbed? The old sailor, remembering the failure of his old experiment, is filled with terror, runs to the sleeping one and shouts, Master, Master, help us! And behold, this man has more authority in his sleep than the rest who are all awake. When he wakes and rebukes the wind and the sea, there is a great silence. The seamen ask, Who is this, that the wind and the sea obey him? This is why he could not be hid. A doctor has a better chance than most to be well known and famous, because he is concerned with man's most precious things, his health, his welfare, his life. It is likely that a good doctor gets closer to performing the impossible. A good doctor can quickly get publicity, earn true respect, and the esteem of a county. But with all his ability and skill, he often has to say, that problem is non-medicinal, and I can do nothing. But once, and only once, the world saw one who did not know what non-medicinal meant. His ability was unlimited. This was what the world wanted. There had been plenty of doctors before. The world did not need skill, but wanted someone who could tell the disease to leave and for it to obey. The world saw only one who could do that, with only a few disciples practicing under his authority. Jesus' ability was so great that he had to stay away from certain places to avoid showing it. And this is probably why we don't find any stories of the Lord Jesus at burials. We get a story of his attending a marriage once. If we were to say which one we should go to a marriage or a burial, we would undoubtedly say that it would be the second. It is also undisputed that over 33 years some of his relatives and friends would have died. But there is no history of his burying any of them. He was once in a room with the dead, but he soon converted it into a room of the living. He once met a funeral on the way to the grave, but there was no burial that day. The truth is, as the late Reverend David Jones of Carnarvon said, if Jesus Christ had regularly gone to burials, they would never have buried anyone. His ability was so great that he would confuse every burial. He and death could not be in the same place. He was all about life, Life was in his garments. If a sick person but touched his clothes, they would become well on the spot. If they put his cloak over a dead man's coffin, the dead would rise that moment. Where such power is, it cannot be hidden. This view of Christ was probably what the evangelist had in mind when he said that Christ could not be hidden. But so true is this phrase about Jesus in every sense. He is in himself the divine and the human in one person. Though full of mystery, it is something that cannot be hidden. His unprecedented achievements placed him at the centre of mankind. His pure and new teachings were more difficult to suppress than it would have been to hide the sun. His perfect and endless life stands alone in the history of man. Especially his great object of coming into the world and saving the sinner sets him in a sacredness that can never be hidden. Many did try to hide him. The Jews tried to hide him. The grave tried to hide him, but he still appeared. The world in its cruel persecutions and atheism sought to hide him, but the more he was concealed, the more he came into view. The expression that he cannot be hidden has never been more true than it is today. His principles permeate all societies. His name distinguishes pagans from civilized people. The contents of the newspapers, though unknowingly, chronicles every day since he came into the world. The beginning of every dated letter and bill that is settled recognizes that event. Everyone is baptized in his name, and in his name everyone hopes to die. He cannot be hidden. That's a sermon delivered and written by Daniel Owen in January 1877. My name's Robert Lomas. Thank you for listening.